So today, we're gonna do a little experiment. We're going to see if we can somehow gasket mod a top mount keyboard. Our test subject for today will be the Freyr TKL. Here's the sound test of the keyboard completely stock, just so you have an idea of how it sounds like originally. As you can hear, the Freyr TKL has a pretty high-pitched sound. It also has a pretty stiff typing feel and a lot of vibrations on the plate while you're typing. The goal of this experiment is to see if the mod can somehow improve on any of those three problems that I mentioned above. First, let's take a look at a standard gasket mounting system. The concept of gasket mounting is to have the plate sandwiched between two gasket materials, such as PARN. The gasket materials are then stick to the top piece and the bottom piece of the case, and then the whole case is put back together, holding the plate inside with only friction. The idea of it is for the gasket to absorb all the vibrations, the downward motions, and reverb, which results in a softer typing feel and even better sound in some cases. However, in order to do this, the designer must make sure that the mounting points on the plate must have contact with both the top piece and the bottom piece of the case. And unfortunately for us, many top-mounted keyboard doesn't have this. This means that when you attach the plate to the top piece via screws, the plate and PCB are then basically levitating above the bottom piece. So the first thing I try to do is to burger mount the keyboard. Burger mounting is essentially, instead of having bare screws through the plate into the top piece, now we are sandwiching the plate between two small O-rings. The screw then goes through the plate and the O-rings and then into the top piece. The idea of it is, instead of having two hard materials limiting its vertical movement, now we have two softer materials which allow us to move up and down much more. A good example of a good burger mount is the Canon Keys Prudo 60. The problem with this method is for you to have a specific size of O-rings that fits the screw and the screw hole. So for some cases, mine included, your standard keycaps O-rings will be too big for it to make any effects at all. So I try to find some other alternatives that I can find around my house or can easily buy in my local hardware store. So I have here with me some various type of rubber sheets, PE foam or packaging foam, and neoprene sheets. First, I cut up the gasket materials into smaller pieces and then just drill a hole through the gasket material with these screws. However, it ended up with most of the gasket materials being too stiff to make any difference. The PE foam, however, is much softer. It is easy to find, comes in various type of sizes and thickness, you're probably having one lying around in your home right now. And as a bonus, it is very easy to cut them into sizes that you want. However, whenever I try to push the screw through the foam piece that I cut up, it ends up not being able to hold its shape at all. If I have to guess, it is probably because the walls around the screw hole is too thin. So when you carve a hole in the middle and push the screw through it, the whole thing just tears apart. For the second experiment, I tried to mimic the way that the gasket mounting system is used when designing a keyboard. But like I mentioned earlier, most designs don't have contact point to the bottom piece. Therefore, you cannot just simply put the gasket strip and sandwiching the plate between the two pieces. But what if we make one? By placing the gasket materials on the bottom piece directly below the mounting points on the plate, we can kinda create a fake mounting point made of the gasket materials. And then we can just put another piece on the mounting cutout on the top piece of the case. Now our only problems is to find a soft materials but rigid enough to hold the plate in place. Yes, Scotch tape. But you can use any types of foam adhesive tape. These foam tapes, surprisingly, almost have the same level of softness to pouring strip, and they can be folded or stacked on top of each other without losing that softness. The mod itself is pretty simple. Just cut the tape into smaller pieces that fit into the case. Then stick it to the bottom piece where the plate is positioned. Make sure that each individual pieces have the same height, and they must all be high enough so that there is room between the bottom housing and the PCB. And please make sure that the PCB doesn't touch the bottom surface, or else there's a chance of shorting the PCB. Then just rest the PCB and the plate onto the pads that you just installed. Make sure that the plate contacts the bottom piece only at the pads. After that, just put one thin layer of tape onto the top piece. And finally, just screw the top piece and the bottom piece together. Make sure that the plate contacts the bottom piece only at the pads. The number of pads and contact points can be vary depending on how much you want the board to flex. Here you may need to use a little bit of force to push the two pieces together. But after we finish, we have ourselves a originally top-mounted keyboard that now is internal, being held together without using any screws. For the final results, the mod makes the typing feel just slightly less stiff. However, it does remove a lot of vibrations on the plate. for sound, the mod does not change the sound signature of the board completely. As you can hear, it still has that high-pitched, clacky sound from a JWK switch in a top mount. However, it does lower the pitch and the loudness of the board. Overall, in my personal opinion and preference, the mod makes the board feel and sound more refined. But before we come to the final conclusion, I decided to do a sanity check to make sure that the aforementioned effects are actually correct. So I tested it out to 3 other popular top-mounted boards. Each keyboards are chosen to specifically test out only some of the improvements. They are the KBD 8X Mark II, the KBD 67 Mark II Polycarbonate, and the duck Octagon V3. The sound comparisons are done the same way as before. The typing feel, I just simply wrote down on a notebook my impressions of it before and after the mod. The KBD 8X has a brass plate, a case foam, and a brass weight, so it's already sound very dense and feel very stiff. The plate has absolutely no vibration while typing. Its goal is to purely test out on the sound and the stiffness. The KBD 67 Mark II, on the other hand, has a very similar top-mount design as the KBD 8X. It also has the same plate and weight material. Its only difference is the polycarbonate housing. Despite the similarities, the KBD 67 is very hollow and plastic sounding. The typing feel is rather stiff because of the brass plate, and it has a lot of plate vibrations. Its purpose is to test out if the mod can remove the plate vibrations and the hollow sound. The final board is the duck Octagon V3. Despite being a slightly higher end board, it uses the standard top mount system. The reason why I chose it is because it has a polycarbonate plate. Its purpose is to test out if we perform the mod on a already flexible and soft feeling plate, it might be possible to create a bouncy typing feel. The 3 tests came out sharing similar results with the original one, with some additions. In terms of sound, it lowers the pitch and makes the board just barely more muted. It also removes some reverbs inside the case, but the effect varies between boards. Also, for boards that is already very dense or having a foam in it, like my KBD8X, the mod is less effective in changing the sound. In terms of typing feel, boards that already have a hard plates and a stiff typing feel, the mod does not do anything to improve on that. It does remove a lot, if not all, of the plates and case vibrations in both the original test and the test on my KBD67. However, for keyboards that have a softer plate material on the other hand, it can somewhat make the board bouncier, as seen with my dock Octagon. One thing to add is that it is not the only way to do this mod. Depending on how the internal design of your keyboard is, you can rearrange the position, change the thickness, or the number of tape used, and it can change the effectiveness of the mod. I guess the conclusion for this whole experiment thing would be this is an optional mod that helps making some top mount keyboards closer to my preference on the sound and the feel. I would recommend trying this mod out if any of the points mentioned above is a problem in your boards. Worst case scenario, you can always change it back to normal if you don't like the mod.